Why don't we go ahead and get started? We're on time, although I expect more people. I expect more people, but you never know. Oops, wrong one. One of the fun things, just as by way of introduction, my name is Mike Devlin. I'm the productivity coach. I've met most of you before, but not everyone. And one of the treasure troves, as it were, for Keller Williams is their online materials, and KW Connect is something we're going to be talking a little bit about it, but I thought we would begin with one of my favorite ways to begin, which is a message from Diana Kuskovo, our maps.
Good morning and welcome to Power Up with Maps. Well, I've got to tell you a story. There was a guy that he was hired to guard the dam, so to speak.
Let me see if I can make this louder. Volume meter. Sorry. I have to plug in the speakers.
Because there were muskrats. And when muskrats get around a dam, well, they can cause havoc, as you already know. So the city got together and they said, we got to hire somebody to get those muskrats. And they gave him a rifle course and gave him a rifle. And boy, he became a marksman. He could shoot anything, and they went, oh, this is fabulous. He'll get rid of all the muskrats. Well, this gentleman hadn't had a job for a long time, and he was so grateful for getting this job. And so he was sitting there one day, and a friend came by, and he was sitting next to the dam, and he was looking out. The friend said, oh, man, this is really cool that you finally got a job, and you're bringing money into your family. And he said, I know, I'm so excited about it. And just then, his friend saw a muskrat going towards the dam. And he said, shoot him, shoot him. And the guy sat there with his rifle on his lap, and he goes, shoot him, aren't you going to shoot the muskrat? And he looks at him and says, are you kidding? You think I want to not have a job again for a year? Well, the question is, do you have a listing that's not priced right? Because if you have a listing, then you have a job, right? Are you holding on to that listing? Worse yet, are you taking listings where the person is not motivated and is overpriced? Now, listen carefully. Take listings when the motivation is high, even if you have to take it at a little bit higher price, because that motivation will cause the price to come down to where they sell. If they're moving out of state, it's a great job, they want the job, and they want to, I don't like the word, and yet they say it, try their house at a higher price. You know what? I take the listing, because I know the motivation is there. I'd also remind them, though, that in 2 weeks without a showing, wrong price. 10 showings without an offer, wrong price. We've got to constantly bring the price down. Now, many agents sit back and they're frightened to change the price. Remember, if we talk with our seller, they blame the market. If we don't talk to our seller, they blame us. And when you're constantly telling them about the prices out there, what's happening, and just tell them, I know you don't want to hear this, and I don't make the market, I only interpret the market. And the market is stating that this is the price we can get at this time on this house. I mean, after all, if you bought Disney stock at $49 last year, and this year it's selling at $29 a share, what price are you going to get? $29. The market dictates the price. And just like stocks, the market dictates the price for the house. So if you have a listing out there and it hasn't sold and it's been 2 weeks, no showing, 10 showings, no offer, get a price reduction today. I mean, the question is, do you want to have a sold sign on the sign in front of the house? I do. Do you?
If I can't move.
Move one, you move the other.
Let's see if this works. I hadn't considered this. All right, let's see if this works better.
Yes.
Was that loud enough?
Sure.
All right. Sorry about that. Now you can hear me. All right. I'll try to remember that.
Hi, I'm Gary Keller. This course will allow you to get off to a fast start you can build on. Because if you repeated the principles every 90 days for a year, believe me, you haven't lost the first year. And just as important, you would have built the foundation and momentum for your entire career. It is practical, realistic, and easy to apply. It's about the fundamentals that determine your level of success in the business of real estate. From our research with top agents, we have found that they too started their careers with these fundamentals, and they continue to do them along with their teams to this very day. And it's not hard. It just requires a little focused effort a few hours every day. Now, there is really just one way to achieve the goal. It's lead generation. Other skills are important, yet without leads to work with, your skills won't mean a thing. Dealing with business never takes precedence over what? Finding business. Never. Research shows that top-producing agents make lead generation their #1 priority and the one thing they make sure they always get done. You can do this. And when you do, you will get the leads, the relationships, the experiences, the career, and the income that you want and deserve. Go get them, and good luck.
Cool. All right. Does everybody have a copy of the handout? I hope so. That's just a little bit of an introduction by Gary Keller. What we're going to be doing today, if you go through the handout, we're going to jump past acknowledgments, table of contents, pretty self-explanatory. But notice it says advanced preparation. Now, in an ideal world, these would all be things that you've already done. Some of you have done some of them, some not. But there's a market center orientation given at each market center each month. So there's one coming up, I know, in Campbell, where many of you are from. There's also one coming up in at the Gateway office. And you ought to make it a point to sit through that. I've been involved in real estate for a really long time. I mean, a really long time. And the thing that I've noticed about Keller Williams is that it's the most organized of any of the real estate organizations I've ever seen, that also has a lot of moving parts as a result. And so in order to get the most out of it, you really need to sit through the orientation. Plus, I'm going to be showing you some online resources. Technology orientation and productivity coaching orientation. I sort of do both of those as the productivity coach and technology ambassador. So if you haven't met with me, I know most of you have, but you should. One of the things, notice it says about key ingredients, complete your KW profile 100%. And when you log into kw.com, and if you're new and you don't have a login, don't worry about it. We're not going to spend a lot of time on things that you can't participate in. But if you were to go to the website answers.kw.com, answers.kw.com, and what you're going to find is an online database that answers questions. And one question that I get asked a lot is, how do I get my profile to 100%? So how do I get my profile to 100%? Looks like somebody's asked this before. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to find the right one. What I oftentimes do is I just type in, hi. Let's see, profile 100%. And how do I get, here we go, how do I get my profile score to 100%? And basically what this does is it gives you what percentages, which of the components of your profile are. And the reason that you want to do this is KW.com is an enormous resource, and you get a profile page. In essence, at Keller Williams, you're going to have many different kinds of websites, and your profile page is like a mini website. It's got what I call a hard URL. It's got a fixed URL, which means that you could put it as a link on things, including an email. You could put it on websites, and when people go there, they would see all of your information. It would be like your online personal resume. It can include an IDX. That means I want to find a home for sale search built into your personal profile. It increases your chances of getting referrals from other KW agents. If I were referring somebody and I were to look up agents in San Jose, I might, and I see somebody had only finished 25% of their profile, I might think they're not really serious, right? You understand? So that's one of the things that you're going to want to do. Activate eEdge and eAgency. Those are sites 2 and 3. If you haven't met with me, we should have met soon, or we should meet soon, and we can go through that process. An email address, you're given a couple of them. You're given a kw.com and a kwsv.com. My recommendation is that you teach Google or Gmail to read them. And again, if you haven't had an orientation with me, we'll be doing that. At some point, you're going to be given a URL, which means for both eEdge and eAgency, you can pick. People usually use their names. One of them is your kwagent.com, and the other one is kwrealty.com. They're actually subdomains. I'm not going to get really technical about that, but it's a free. How about that? You don't have to go to GoDaddy and register something. However, you probably need to go to GoDaddy and register something at some point, either your name or some descriptive kind of a domain. And you need business cards. And if you haven't gotten those yet, if you're starting to get business cards and you haven't ordered them, a recommendation that I have is that you set up a Google account and you get Google Voice and use that as a phone number, because it can ring multiple different phones. All right. So moving along. I'm sure all of you have done all the things that are on that page already, right? Or anyhow, or scheduled to do. But if you're new, meet with me, because I can help you get through those things and launch your different websites. This, by the way, the websites and all that is an important thing to spend some time on. We're in Silicon Valley, and you are, in my opinion, oftentimes judged by the quality of your stuff, right? You understand? People are going to look at your web page, and if it works and it's functional and it's complete, they're going to judge you differently than if they go there and it doesn't work and it isn't functional and it's incomplete. Get your head in the game. Imagine the following. Your business is thriving. Your life is everything you've dreamed of. You're at the top agent in the market center, rookie of the year, already capped. For those of you who aren't, this is a good thing. It may not sound like doesn't mean somebody shot you. It means that you've reached 100% commissions. You're going to hire a team and grow your business. One of the things that KW is very big on is assisting people in not only becoming successful individually, but then growing a team. We're very big on teams. Customers rave about your service, your family, and the video, which is that we've already watched. But what I would like to do is to just take a couple of minutes. You remember the video, even though I was sort of premature in showing it. What is the one way to achieve success in real estate? Does anybody remember that from the video?
Lead generation.
Lead generation. Was there a second thing that he said? Which is more important, dealing with business or finding business? Finding business. And what are the habits of top producing agents? Lead generation every day. Every business has two businesses. If I were a dentist, I would have two businesses. One business is the business of dentistry, when people come in and they show me their bad teeth. And the other business is the business of getting clients to come in, getting patients. If I had a restaurant, I would have two businesses. One business is making and serving food to people. The other business is getting people to come into the restaurant. I know of a local restaurant that we like to go to because it's a local little restaurant that always seems to be struggling in terms of getting customers. Good food and good service is not enough if people don't know that you're in business. And one of the things that if to start with, if you're in real estate, what business are you in? I mean, I know it sounds like I just answered it, right? If we were going to come up with words to describe the business that you're in, how about this? We'll start with real estate, right? But let's take that off the list for a second. What other words would you use to describe the business that you're in? Service, marketing. Service and marketing. Any others? Any? You're in sales. How about that? All right, you understand? You're in sales. You're in professional selling. What we sell, you understand, you're not really in real estate. Because what, you understand, you don't, unless, I mean, some of you own real estate, I know that, and some of you have sold your own real estate, but that's not what we do as professionals. We sell, we help other people sell real estate. At its most essence, what you have to sell is not the real estate itself, right? Do you understand? Because you're not the principal in the transaction. You're simply an agent in the transaction. And as an agent, what you're selling to people is a bundle of services. You understand? What you have for buyers is a bundle of services that you can provide them that will help them get the house that they want in the time frame they want and for the price that they want. What you have for sellers is a bundle of services to help the seller get the price they want in the time frame they want and in the manner that they want. So what you are, the first thing you need to understand is that you're in sales, and the second thing you need to understand is what you are selling, and what you are selling is yourself in a sense, and that you're selling the services that you have to offer. In that sense, real estate is an extremely easy business. First, you need to just know what it is that you're selling. And by the way, a lot of people in real estate don't seem to understand what they're selling. Because when I hear them talk to potential clients, they talk about houses more than they talk about the services that they offer. They ask them, what kind of home are you looking to buy, rather than how are you finding the home you want to buy. Right? So first you have to understand at a very conceptual level what you're selling. You're selling services to make other people's lives easier. You understand, if buyers and sellers didn't have problems, they would not need real estate agents. And the second thing you need to realize then, if that's what you're selling, you need to let people know that it's for sale. That's lead generation. And that was, I won't preach too often, but that was, I have to admit, one. Ignite is designed to get your business up and running and into production. This is called your path to success as quickly as possible. Don't let people tell you that you need 6 months to sell a house. You don't. The goal should be to try to write up business in the next 30 days. Right? If people say, well, what's the goal of this program? It's to write up some business in the next 30 days. Either to take a listing or get a buyer to make an agreement to work with you in an exclusive arrangement. Right? And preferably that would translate into writing up a purchase contract on the house. Is it possible to find a buyer and write up a contract in 30 days? The answer is yes, absolutely. How long does it take? Not very long. I was at the Nob Hill years ago, the one around the corner, and I was not, to understand there's different kinds. Remember I said that the most important thing is knowing what it is that you're selling, and number two, letting people know that it's for sale. So I was at Nob Hill, the one down on Santa Teresa, dressed something like I am now, although I have to admit the logo was for a different organization, but I was looked like I sort of look now, right? And the checker looked at me and said, so how's the real estate business? And I said, great, I've listed a starter home, a first-time home buyer's home in the neighborhood. Do you know anybody interested in buying a home for the first time? And she said, I am. Right? And I didn't sell her that one, but I sold her a condo on Gold Run in the Vista Park area, which 3 or 4 years later she sold, and I listed it and helped her move into another home in Blossom Valley. How did she know to ask me that question? Anybody want to take a guess? I'm wearing what's called career apparel and a name badge. How many people here are wearing career apparel or a name badge besides me?
I don't have it.
You don't have it yet. But you understand you should let people know that you're in the real estate business, right? Rather than to be a secret agent, right? So, and I've seen people take off their name badge because they said, well, I'm going to take it off because I don't want people to, like keep talking to me about, about real, I mean, it's such a bother, right? So we want you to do it as quickly as possible. There's going to be 18 of these sessions. It's structured to be taught in 5 days a week. We're not doing it that way. We're doing it 3 days a week because Tuesdays we have team meetings and Wednesdays a coaching program called Bold, which we encourage people to go to. And besides, I'm going to it, so I'm not going to be here to teach. And so this is a list of the different classes that we're going to be going through. That's not our schedule, but the tools. Let's talk about your Ignite tools. Is that okay? I'm going on anyhow. There's a course manual which is available online. And one of my goals when I'm talking to agents is to get them to learn how to find things online. So if you were to go, this is KW Connect. Let's see if it will let me get back to the mykw.com. Right, if you go to mykw.com and you go to the search and you type in Ignite, and by the way, notice over here scheduled events. Monday, these are all at noon because of the 2-hour time difference. New Agent Monday, your first steps to using KW technology. These are webinars that are given every week by KW. They're at noon, and all you have to do is click on it. And I would recommend that you do this. It's Ignite. So I'm searching for Ignite. Slowly. All right. See what comes up first is KW Ignite, KW Course Ignite. I think they both will take you to the same spot. And notice here's a copy of the book. You can downloads available. You can download the entire student manual. And if you want to see the instructor manual, you can download that too. They don't care, right? There isn't much difference between the two. But in the future, we're going to have a couple of handouts, but you ought to download your own manual for those of you that are, and if you're a guest, we'll give you a copy. All right. Scripts. One of the most important parts of being successful is knowing where to go, what to do, and what to say. The emphasis is on knowing what to say. And the Ignite series, as is most of the Keller Williams lead generation programs, are very heavily developed, heavily based on scripts. In other words, we have suggestions as to what you ought to say. And I have noticed a resistance often from particularly people newer to the business to learning scripts from other people. And what I hear is, well, that's not me. Those aren't my words. I'd rather use my words. My suggestion is that you try using these words first until you can practice them, and then later you can try your words. I can remember back in the 1980s going through a training program by Floyd Wickman, who only the old people in real estate remember anymore, probably, and he had scripts about answering calls and what to say at open houses, and today I still say those words, right? And then when people say, well, what do I say when somebody calls and what do I say at an open house, the questions that I go through and the things I say are based upon the questions that he used that I learned in the 1980s, and also some others from a guy named Mike Domer. Hi, how you doing? Glad you could make it. Also from the 1980s. So you should spend some time practicing this. I'm going to repeat this, but I'm assuming that you're here because you would like to make money, right? I'm sort of assuming that. And what I would recommend that you do, and depending on how much money you want to make, would be whether you do 30 minutes or an hour, but you ought to spend 30 minutes to an hour every day, 5 days a week, practicing scripts. Right? It's better to find somebody else who's going through the class to practice them with. just practice saying the words to someone else. So find misery loves company, right? You know, find some. And if you can't find anyone in the class, do you have a friend or relative that you're irritated with, and tell them you practice scripts on them, right? But this is an important thing. Machiavelli wrote, "In time of peace, prepare for war." Right? And so the less thinking you have to do when you're talking to somebody, the more effective you're going to be. Do you understand? Because after years, when somebody asks me a question, it just comes out what I'm going to say. Do you understand? And the words that I say aren't necessarily always my words, right? And you need to learn scripts. One of the things that if you were to talk to agents that are very effective, and you hung around and listened to them, you would find that they're saying pretty much the same thing to the same people all the time. It can be boring to be successful in real estate. Do you understand? It can be exciting to be unsuccessful as you're making it up as you're going along, right? It can be kind of exhilarating, right, as you're stumbling over your words and getting caught in misstatements and contradictions and having people tell you to leave because they don't, right? You understand? That can be a little bit more exciting, but the knowing what you're going to say. So you're going to spend 30 minutes to an hour practicing scripts, 30 minutes to an hour learning the business. In other words, what is the most common question someone's going to ask you? Assuming you're not hiding from them, right? You understand? Assuming they know that you're in real estate, what's the question they're going to ask you?
How's the market?
How's the market? How's the real estate business? Do you know what you would say right now to somebody? Do you have a 30-second, this is my explanation of what you would do when you're asked that question? If the answer is you're not sure what you're going to say, you're in big trouble. Right? Do you understand? Because that's the first question anyone's going to ask you, and you should have a plan as to what you're going to say. You should be reading, and I'm going to show you as we go along how to create Google alerts or information about what's happening in real estate, first-time home buyers, FHA loans, what's happening with investors, what's happening with short sales, what's happening with bank-owned properties will show up in what's called a Google Reader for you every day without you having to do any work to go look for it. You should become familiar in how to run the multiple listing service statistics programs. You should know how many days homes are on market, are prices going up or going down, what is the median price of a home in Santa Clara County, what is the average price. You understand? These are things that if you ought to be familiar with if you're going to be successful in real estate. You need to practice scripts every day. You need to study what's going on in the real estate every day, and you need to lead generate. Job aids, toys, campaign planners, checklists, client communication templates. You'll notice that there's a whole bunch of these already available on kw.com Ignite in the Toolkit tab. There's a toolkit of stuff you get in this course. How are we doing so far? Huh? E-Edge is one of the things you're going to want to learn. If you only have 5 people that you're talking to, it's not difficult to keep track of them. But you're never going to make any money with only 5 people. Right? When you have 2,000 people that you've talked to, you need technology to follow up with them. And we have an integrated program called E-Edge, and there's lots of training online. Before we're done today, I'm going to show you how to access it. Okay.
So you just mentioned about the alert, the Google alert thing. Mm-hmm. How can I get that?
I will show you how to create a Google alert by the end of it.
Okay.
Do you want to do it? I'll do it now. I'll do it now. Is that okay? Was people curious about this? First of all, I believe you need to get a Google account. All right, and if you don't, I have this thing tricked out. So if you don't know how to do this, if you log into Google and you type in Google Alerts. If you're logged into Google, this is going to pop up, Google Alerts, monitor the web for interesting new content. You click on that. Notice it's going to ask for a search query. how is the real estate market in San Jose, right? Maybe even throw in California. Now notice what's happening is it's starting to, let me just go here. What's happening is over here, it's starting to show me what it kind of thinks is going to come up in that search, right? And the problem with these nets is it brings in some fish that you don't want, but that's not very difficult to go through. Result type everything. How often I use what's called Google Reader, and what that means, instead of having it sent to my email, it goes into a feed that is called Google Reader, and when I click on Create Alert, it's going to show me, it's going to create this alert, and every day when I go to my Google Reader, it's going to show me everything that it found, news, blog, web, anything that it found on the internet. Google is searching constantly, 24 hours a day, for that search string. If you wanted to know how do I get Google Reader, if you go to Google and you type in Google Reader, you're going to see Google Reader is going to come up, and my Google Reader has already come up. And for example, I clean it out, but one of my Google alerts is first-time home buying tips. And right here is a bunch of first-time home buying tips that came through since late last night when I did it last time. And I've overdone this, so don't let my numbers scare you, but general real estate, I look at this, and right now it doesn't look like very much that's useful, except for right here, Forum on California housing market. That might be useful, and a 5-year forecast from Real Estate Economy Watch about prices rising 8.5 to 22%. Yeah, you understand? So I don't have to go and search for stuff. It just shows up. And so what you want to do is you want to write as many of these search phrases. If you were in Google and you wanted to become an expert on real estate in San Jose, what would you type in to search for information? And instead of doing that as a search, you do it as an alert, and it collects that information for you every day. So I have them on things that you don't care about, but FHA, VA loans, FHA at least, and you get the idea. You understand, if you're in real estate, you need to be able, you're selling yourself, right? You understand, a bundle of services. Your ability to talk intelligently about what's going on in the real estate market will be a deciding factor as to whether or not anyone hires you. The last thing you want them to do is say, well, did you see the article in the San Jose Mercury this morning about what's happening in, the South County, the real estate market? And you go, no. What was it? Right? Did you understand? If you said to your doctor, did you hear about that new heart drug for my condition? He said, really? They got a new heart drug? Huh? That's interesting. Where'd you hear about? Well, you'd be expecting him to know, wouldn't you? Right? Isn't that true? You'd expect him to know. Right? They expect you to know. Right? This isn't as easy as it looks sometimes, selling real estate. Right? You understand? It requires that you know something about the real estate business. And more than your clients do. Otherwise, how can you help them? All right. Don't let myths slow you down. Sadly, many good agents hold themselves back from ever realizing their full potential because they hold on to old negative beliefs about success. One of the things, I don't have the copy in my hand to show you, but there's a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which is still a best-selling book about real estate. And it's sort of like an organizational manual. You ought to get a copy and read it. I have a copy that has tabs. It's called a Leadership Edition. It's a little more expensive, but it has tabs. There are audio tapes that you can download from KW.com from a trainer that Gary Keller trained that goes through the book with you. Right? I'm just saying you might want to read this. The source of most of our fears is myth. I find it extremely helpful to think of fears in terms of what generally creates them, myths, and what sets us free from them, truths. It's about learning to look past your fears to the truth of the situation, investigating the myths, and avoiding the misunderstanding that holds us back. So this is a, oh my gosh, don't you hate to see those sort of things stop and do? What we're going to do is, I'd like you to just take a minute and look at some of these myths. And if you think, circle any of them that you may have. If you can think of some that are not on the list, feel free to write them down. Just take a couple of minutes. We want to talk about this. All right, let's, a couple of, any that were circled by anyone? Yes.
Number 5, I will need to invest a lot of money to kickstart my real estate career.
Need to invest a lot of money. Does it take a lot of money to sell real estate?
Not to sell, but to start.
To start your career. It takes leads, doesn't it? Right? It takes lead generation. We're going to talk about that. And the most effective lead generation doesn't cost any money. Right? There's different ways in which you can get real estate business. You can wait for it, right? If you wear a name badge and a Keller Williams shirt and you sit around, someday somebody's going to say, hey, can you help me sell my house, right? I'd like to buy a house. You can wait for it. Another way to get real estate business is you can buy it. Right? You can buy zip codes in Zillow. You can run ads and you can pay Google to run ads. You can buy it. You can, and the third way is to earn it, and that involves talking to people, which doesn't cost anything. And of the three, that's the most effective way to build a business. Any others? Don't everybody blurt them out at once now. I have to be an expert and know everything before I can kickstart my business. I am not valid. You're never going to know everything. I hate to tell you, right? After 30, I don't know everything. And the stuff that I don't know, they keep creating that at an increasing rate. You understand? There's more stuff. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know enough. One of the things that Gary Keller talks about in The Millionaire Real Estate Agent is a sort of like a script and an attitude, which is, I'm a professional. What I know, I know. And if you ask me a question or if something comes up and I know it, you can trust that I know it. Also, I know what I don't know. And if something comes up in a transaction and I don't know it, I'm going to get an expert who knows it. For example, I go to my doctor and he thinks I need to do something else. He gives me a business card of another doctor. Right? Isn't that right? If you go to a lawyer, the lawyer says, well, I don't do that kind of law. Here, go to this person who specializes in that particular. It's not unprofessional to defer to people that know more. I don't know what to say. That may be true. But you need to internalize scripts. You need to do them over and over again. Even if you can't find somebody to practice with, you should practice reading them out loud, because the way our minds talk In other words, my mind oftentimes is very good at pronouncing every word, right? You understand? But when I actually say it, sometimes not so good, right? And so you need to practice saying them out loud enough times so that when somebody asks you a question, you know what to say. I doubt, does anybody believe that the fact that you have a license means that you know how to sell real estate, right? Because getting a real estate license is like getting a fishing license, isn't it? It doesn't teach you how to fish. I have to invest a lot. I don't have time for training. You know, there's the old line about the guy that has to cut down a tree, so he spends the first hour sharpening his axe. There are different ways to learn. One is by the street. And I meet lots of real estate agents who learned real estate on the street, and it's harder for them. If you're brand new, you have an advantage. You understand, if I was going to learn to play tennis, would it be a good idea for me to just go take a tennis racket and get a box of, you know, what are they, a crate, a bucket of balls, and just spend weeks hitting the ball my own way, right? You understand? Holding it my way, standing my way, and then taking lessons, right? You understand? Because the guy's going to say that, who showed you to hold it that way? That's not how you stand, right? You understand? I now have to correct things. It's better to get the most people who start real estate careers fail. And as we're talking as a percentage, way more than 50% of the people who start in real estate aren't in real estate in 18 months to a year, to 2 years, right? According to the National Association of Realtors, watching people who pay dues, right? Because they see people who join the board and start paying dues, and then they see them stop paying dues, and 70% stop paying dues after 18 months. This is not early retirement. Right, you understand? They didn't make so much money, they didn't have to work anymore. They didn't make enough money, and they dropped out of the business. Right? And the thing that, one of the most important things that an office can provide for you is training. You understand? The three most important things in determining the value of a home are location, location, and location. And the three most important things in determining the value of an office is training, training, and training. So one of the things about this is whether, Henry Ford, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. There are some people that don't succeed in real estate because they're too smart. Right? You understand, in the sense that they think of all the reasons why it's not going to work. All the reasons why nobody would want to buy today. All the reasons why nobody would want to sell now. Right? And all the reasons why nobody would want to hire them. And you understand, and that's all the reasons they come up with. And then there are other people that aren't smart enough to know that they're not supposed to make it, right? Nobody ever explained to them they're not going to make it, and they just go out and start talking to people. Help when you need it. Accountability sessions, we're going to be having, if you're at the Campbell office, we have Red Bold on Tuesdays. I would go. I'm going to be doing coaching for people, and we're going to be doing something similar if you're new. And the idea is it's to help you do the things you need to do. If you're going to lose weight, it's sometimes easier to tell other people, right? If you're going to stop smoking, it's sometimes easier to tell other people, because then when they see you smoke, they'll say, well, what's up, right? I thought you said you were going to stop, right? And so for whatever reason, sometimes it's easier for me to do things that are good for me if I'm expected to do that and other people are watching. The learn to earn model, what our system is based on is to teach you what you need to do in order to make money, and then as you make money, to expand your business model. The problem with looking at experienced agents, we have agents that are closing a transaction a week. The problem, I have agents that say, I want to follow them around. I want to see what they do. I'm going to do what they do, and I'm going to get what they get. You can't do what they do, right? You understand? They're spending $10,000. Some people are spending thousands of dollars a month in marketing expenses, right? But of course, if you were closing for a month, you could too. right? So it's not what are you doing now, it's what did you do when you were new, right? Tell me that, because that is what you can do, and that's what we're going to share with you. Today's plan of action, we're going to talk about goals, building a database, winning customers. We will take a break at least once. And we're going to talk about some habits and planning and resources and all sorts of great stuff. Ignite is designed to keep you active and in productivity in class. What we're saying here is that this is not a sit and learn this isn't like school, right? It may sound like it so far, but the idea is that you're going to be given specific activities to do, because it's the doing of the activities. And that means we're going to practice role playing. If I told everybody that, fewer would show. We're going to do some phone calls. Those phones are really heavy, you know. Even though they keep making them smaller and smaller, they seem really heavy. Building a database, scheduling time blocking. It would be nice to have a cell phone to bring to class. I can't believe anybody left home without it. And note cards and envelopes. We do it old school as well. If you have a laptop or a tablet PC, and you're going to start, we're going to talk about your sphere of influence, making a list of people to talk to. What we're going to do is talk about goals for a little bit. There are a lot of different ways to look at this. One of the ways is think big. In fact, what I want to do is one of Gary Keller's, the MREA, by the way, stands for the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. Think big, act bold, aim high, and live large. We're going to talk about thinking big to begin with. And I'm going to sort of throw in a little bit about aiming high. The idea about aiming high is that if you ever taught to shoot, like a gun, at something, they usually tell you to aim high. The reason is that if you aim high, you're more likely to hit a suitable target than if you aim low. And the habits, when they talk about million, they're talking about number of homes sold. And in our market, 2.5 million is not a lot of homes sold, right? But that would be like doing one a quarter to 5 million to 10 million to 20 million to 40 million. And the point of this is that if your goal is to do 2.5 million, in our marketplace, that's like 4 houses, right? You know, under 4 median priced homes in Santa Clara County, you'd be up at that level. If your goal is to do 4 homes a year, then you can take 5 hours to do a market analysis on a house, a CMA. You could take 5 hours to do a CMA because you aren't doing very many of them. You know what I'm saying? You could show buyers 40 homes and take months for them to make a decision. Well, it wouldn't matter because you could reach that goal spending months to close any. You could pretty much not lead generate at all, right? Do you understand? And just rely on family members and friends and people that you owe money to, right? You know, to send you business so that you're scraping. You understand? If you have a minimum goal, then you're going to do minimum things to reach that goal. But if you start off with a goal that you don't want to do 1 transaction a quarter, how about 1.5 a month, right? Or something like that. Now you can't spend 5 hours on a market analysis. You can't spend 2 months showing homes, right? You understand? So the systems that you design and implement are going to reflect the goals you have. You need to think big. And we're going to talk specifically what that means. What is the payoff? What does achieving 16 transactions look like? It's the same as 4 buyer sales, 4 listings in 3 months. And according to the 2000 2010, and it's probably gone down. There was a 2011, which I have a copy of, but I haven't updated this. There isn't a big difference. 8 transactions a year was the average in 2009. It's gone down since then. And what I want to do is to just give you an idea of what this would look like. Let me see if all right. Let's start with, as a general concept, because for some people, if I told you that you could close a transaction a week, right? There are people who just say, no, I can't, right? Although we have agents that do that, right? So sometimes it's easier to work backwards from effort to effect than effect to effort, right? So we're going to start with this. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong. I started with the wrong slide. Okay, I'm sorry. How about that? All right. Does that? It was the first one was sort of scary. I know, right? No. These aren't here. This is the. I hope that the one before that didn't upset anyone, right? Because usually when I mean 40 hours. I mean, if I wanted to work 40 hours a week, I wouldn't have got my real estate license. Isn't that the attitude? So let's not go there. Let's assume a robust 20 hours a week. All right? How about that? All right? Does that sound like and the number one thing, according to Gary Keller and Sharmila and me, is that you ought to spend your time lead generating. So let's say you spent 80% of your time lead generating, right? On a 20-hour work week. That would be 16 hours a week. If you were working a 40-hour work week, that would be, 32 hours a week, right? Which already sounds like a lot. But let's round down, right? You understand, because there's disruptions and things like that. 3 hours, if you did that 5 days a week, that'd be 3 hours a day. 3 hours a day. That would be spending 20 hours a week and 80% of that focused on the most important thing that you need to do in your job. For most people in real estate, when I ask them the question, how much time do you spend a day? I ask the question, if you had a real job, like you worked at Home Depot, let's say, you had a real job and you spent as much time in that job doing what they told you, this is the most important thing for you to do. Remember, the most important thing for you to do in this job is this, and you spent as much time doing that thing as you do lead generating, would you still have a job? Do you understand? Most of us would be fired if we had an employer that was watching our hours. Right? We'd be fired. And you see, one of the problems with being in real estate is we're independent contractors. We get to do our own thing. Right? Real estate is too easy to get into, it's too easy to get out of, and it's just too optional when you're in it. The people that make a lot of money in real estate, they look at this like a job for which they will be fired if they do not do it. That's their attitude. Right? You understand? Freedom is a gift not always wisely used. So 3 hours a day assumes you're spending 80% of a 20-hour work week. Now, the goal that we're going to be talking about in this class is that you meet 10 people a day. New. That does not include real estate agents at the office that you've never met before. Right? You understand? They're probably not going to list their home with you. Right? They probably don't need your help in buying a house. So assuming you're doing this as a profession and you would like to make money, 3 hours a day, and so 5 days a week, right, because you got to have time off. There's laws against overworking you. 50 weeks a year, 2-week vacation. That's 2,500 contacts that you would make in 1 year. The fortune is in following up. But let's just say that on the average, how long do people live in a house before they sell it? The NAR would say it's 8 years. We're in San Jose. How about 15, right? We'll sort of double that number. So we're assuming that people only move once every 15 years. That's 166 transactions from the people that you would get to know by talking to 10 new people a day. And assuming that you are bad at this, that you don't learn scripts and you're not good at following up, and you lose 90% of that business. Right? You understand? You're making only a partial, weak effort, and you get 1 out of 10 of those deals, you would do 16 transactions. Right? That's a 10% market share from 10 people a day. I used to work for a real sales company. We sold photocopiers. You had to turn in a piece of paper every day that told them how many people you talked to, how many appointments, how many copiers. If the number was 0, they were really upset with you. Right? You understand? They would fire you if the number, they called it counting your figs. That's what your figures. They wanted to see your figs. That's what they would say. Every day, turn in your figures. You ought to count your own figs. Right? Every day, you ought to ask yourself, how many people did I talk to? And if the answer, new people about real estate, and if the answer was none, you took that day off. That was not a working day. Right? Do you understand? This is not complicated, right? But also not necessarily easy. Right? You understand? Because I found by just dressing the part and walking around, you could talk to people, right? And we're going to cover who do you talk to and how do you find them and all that. But the reason that most people do, I had people say, well, I'm not making any money. It really doesn't work. You can't make any money in real estate. And I know they haven't done anything. Right? I joined the health club once and it didn't work either. Right? Yeah.
Recently I faced a question, like one of our prospect buyers, he's my friend, but he was saying his impression is kind of like end of the quarter, like this October, November, December, there's no production on the market, there's not a lot more houses, so he's kind of thinking he start looking at the houses from January.
Right.
So what should I say that time?
Well, the thing about, so the question is, there's maybe, it's not as active of a market right now. Maybe it'll be more active in January. That's true, perhaps. Mm-hmm. If it's historically the way things are, could interest rates go up? Mm-hmm. Could they? Maybe. Well, could they go down? Maybe. How are they at the, how low are they now? Have they ever been lower? Not in, no. So they've never been lower. No. So they could go up. Do things like that sometimes change after elections?
I think so.
Yeah? Is it possible that sometimes things like that change after elections? What?
Unlikely now, though.
Well, I know what I'm saying is that interest rates are really low. Really low. They could stay the same. They could go down. They could go up. Nobody knows. If they go up by even 0.5%, could you figure out in his price range how much more money that would cost him over an average term? Right, we're talking many thousands of dollars, right? Maybe tens. Is it also possible that there are more buyers on the market in January as well? That's right. There's more sellers, but there's more buyers, right? More competition. That's right. Right. So the people that are selling now, do you think they also have heard this, that the market is better next year?
They did.
Yeah, the people that are selling now.
Yeah.
Right, but they also know this.
They also.
So why are they selling now? Why would somebody have, what?
To avoid the competition.
Or because they have to?
They have to.
Because they have to. They have an immediate need, right? So they can't wait. Who would it be easier to deal with, to negotiate with? Somebody who has to sell, has an immediate need, and there's less competition, or when there's a lot of homes on the market and a lot of buyers and the people can afford to wait. You understand? Somebody who put their home on their market at Thanksgiving really wants to sell their home. Motivation is very important, right? We know that interest rates are low right now. We know that these people have an immediate need or they wouldn't be doing it. We know there's less competition. So the idea is, what I've always found is, why don't we go look? Why don't we go take a look at some? Because what I learned a long time ago is that real estate agents do not sell houses. Right? They don't. Houses sell houses. Right? Real estate agents screw up sales sometimes, but don't sell the house. So when people find the one they want, they buy it. Buying is an emotional decision. Right? So I would start showing them homes. Let them see. Because if they find one they really love, is there a chance that it won't be there in January? Right? It's one thing for them to discuss this in the abstract.
Yeah, so that's what I wrote yesterday
Yeah.
in my email. Like the interest rate might stay the same, it might go up, it could be lower.
Yeah.
The house prices could go up, it could be the same, and the competition could be more.
Right. What I would do, you see, one of the things that you need to do, we're going to talk about this in what's called the Daily 10-4, because I talked about spending some time learning scripts, spending some time learning the market, spending some time, right, 3 hours a day, lead generation. You need to also spend time going out and looking at houses. Because before they let me sell photocopiers, they wanted to make sure I knew how a photocopier worked. Right, and to know about other photocopiers. And in other words, what you need to do is go preview homes. What you need to do, this has just been my experience. It may not work. I'm not saying there's nothing magical. But if you call somebody up and say, you know, I saw this great house yesterday, I think you ought to take a look at it.
Okay.
Right? Why don't we just go look at it? So rather than conversing with them over the internet, you need to show them houses. Right? And if they're willing to go, because if they see the one they want, have you ever gone to the store with the intention of not buying anything
No.
and then bought something?
Right.
Right? You know, right? Because you saw what you wanted.
Right.
And so you know, well, this is what we want, we'll buy it. All right. And I found that it's always better to talk about properties for sale to potential buyers. And the more you do this, the more they perceive that you're a real agent.
But before that, I need to have that buyer's broker's.
We'll talk about that. Talk to me about that.
Okay.
You don't need the buyer-broker agreement. It comes in very, very different levels,
Okay.
right? But let's talk before you do that. Friends and family members. There's I have an alternative,
Okay.
right? I have something that I call buyer service guarantee, or a buyer service pledge, and it's not as binding, but it's basically this is what I'm going to do to help you find your home. There's 12 things. What do you right? Yeah, oh, that's great. And all I'm asking is that you agree to work with me in this process. All right, sign here. And so rather than it's their agreement to lock themselves in with you, this is your service agreement to them. It just sounds easier. All right. So, business cards, right? We talked about that. This is not in your material. I'm still ruminating about goals, because what I found, because I've done this a lot with new people, is that they're not going to make a goal. This maybe you're an exception, but most will not make a goal to do 2 transactions a month because they don't think they can. Right? When you do 2 transactions in a month, it becomes a whole lot easier to create a goal. Right? I'm just saying. So you're going to get business cards, aren't you? 1,000 of them, I would hope. One of the things, I used to work for a company, we moved our location a lot. And every time we did, agents would complain. And I remember one guy was showing me, because he had had a window office, and he had boxes of old business cards with different addresses on them from our company. Some of them were where the sun was beating down and had washed out the cards, and he was complaining to me because he wanted me to buy him more business cards because he still had thousands of old business cards from previous locations. This person was unclear on the concept of business cards. Right? You understand? This is related to you spending 3 hours talking to people. You ought to hand out business cards. If you got a 5% response out of 1,000, if you handed out 1,000 business cards and talked to people, and 5% of them responded, and 10% of those ended up in a transaction, that would be 5 transactions. $10,000 is a low end on a commission. you could afford more business cards, right? You could afford. The idea is you ought to be. Am I being? I hope I'm not being obtuse or vague. You need to commit to spending a lot of time talking to people about the real estate business. You need to know about the real estate business. You need to know what to say to people, and you need to hand them the business card when you're talking to them, and make some sort of a suggestion. All right, so what would be the payoff? One of the ways to do this, and the reason that I did my system first is because I've had difficulty getting people to do this when they're new, but if you knew how much money you wanted to make, right? And this is related to what we sometimes refer to as a big why. Why do you want to sell real estate? And I know that many people when they're new don't have a great answer for this. Right? I mean, people say, I'd like to make money. Well, yeah, we all say that. I'd like to win the lottery too, right? But I never buy a ticket, right? But if you ask me, I'd say, yeah, I'd like to win, but I don't buy tickets. So I'm not going to win. So the idea is that for you to make a commitment to spend 3 hours a day lead generating, would you still have time out of that to spend to research the market and practice scripts and go to meetings? Right? You understand we're still talking about a 20-hour week here. So for you to do that, there usually has to be something in your mind that's worth putting out the effort. Right? Now, what I've found for me, I'm just talking about my own personal experience. I was sort of, futzing around. I was working in an area in Blossom Valley, not far from here. I was farming. I listed a house on Crow Lane. And it was a Pan-Cal home, only 5 years old, and I found that I double-ended the transaction. This is an old story, right? I have to just tell you that. And I remember looking at the check. It was $14,876, and I forget the cents now. $14,876. I spent some time looking at this check. Now, I understand you guys get checks like that all the time from people, but no one had ever written me a check for anything close to that amount of money, right? And I remember looking at this and thinking, I ought to do this more often, right? I really ought to do this more often, and I started doing it a lot more often, right? You understand, sometimes when people are new, they incubate. Right, we're tapping on the shell all the time, saying, come on, right? They incubate. One thing that can help you break through that shell is a commission check, right? Which is why I'm trying to get you to get one as soon as possible. But once you get them, do you understand, if you said, I want to make $120,000 a year, that means you have to net $10,000 a month. That means you have to close one transaction a month. You understand how you could, this is not complicated. I'm not going to go through this with you because people will write down 500,000 and then, but you understand what you have to do. If you wanted to do a transaction a month, how many people would you have to talk to a day? I'm suggesting you reverse this. 10 people a day, right? Talk to 10 people a day. We're going to talk about adding people to your database. You're going to spend 3 hours a day doing things to generate leads, right, on average. If you do an open house for an agent, right, that's a nice block right there. All right. And then when you start getting checks, we'll meet again and talk about it. When customers, let's take a break. We've done this for an hour. You guys have